There's a community 40 miles from where I grew up in Lancaster County that hasn't reported a single case of Lyme disease in living memory. Not one. And they live in the same woods, walk the same trails, and pull ticks off their animals just like everybody else. I spent 3 years trying to figure out why what I found changed how I think about everything I did for 38 years in pest control. The Amish don't use Sawyer, they don't use off, they don't spray their yard for $300 a season. They use a $2 oil that their great grandparents used and their great grandparents used before that. And the reason you've never heard about it has nothing to do with the science. The science is solid. It has to do with the fact that you can't patent something that grows wild. I want to be clear about something before we get into this. I'm not a physician. I'm not selling anything. I'm a retired pest control specialist from Berks County, Pennsylvania, who spent 4 decades walking tick-infested forest edges from the Delaware Water Gap to the Catskills. I've pulled more ticks off dogs and people than most vets have seen in their entire career. What I know because I saw it. And what I'm about to tell you, I've been sitting on for a long time. Let me start with what you actually need to understand about ticks before the oil makes any sense. Because if you don't understand why ticks behave the way they do, none of this will stick. The black-legged tick Ixodes scapularis, which is just a Latin way of saying the deer tick you find in your backyard doesn't bite you the way a mosquito does. A mosquito lands, stabs, and leaves in 30 seconds. A tick is slower and a lot more deliberate. It climbs a blade of grass or a low branch, extends its front legs, and waits. That behavior is called questing. It can hold that position for hours, sometimes days, waiting for a warm body to brush past. When you walk through that tall grass on the edge of your property, you don't feel it land. It finds a warm, dark spot on your body, and it starts to feed. The whole process is designed to be invisible. Now, here's the part the CDC pamphlet glosses over. They'll tell you a tick needs to be attached for 36 to 48 hours before it transmits Lyme bacteria. Borrelia burgdorferi, that's the organism that causes Lyme disease. I've seen that number repeated for 30 years. What they don't tell you is that number comes from studies done under ideal laboratory conditions with fed, partially engorged ticks. In the real world, with a hungry nymph tick, that's the stage that's about the size of a poppy seed and the stage most responsible for human infection. That transmission window can be considerably shorter. A study out of the Northeast in the late 90s started asking harder questions about that timeline. The answer wasn't as clean as the pamphlet suggests. And there's something else. The nymph is active in May, June, and July, prime gardening season, prime outdoor season for your grandkids. The adult tick gets all the attention because it's big enough to see, but it's the nymph doing most of the damage. And it's so small that most people never even know it was there until weeks later when the symptoms start. So that's your enemy. Small, patient, invisible, and fast enough to do damage before you know it's happening. Keep that in mind. Now, back to Lancaster County. I first heard about the Amish oil from a woman named Rebecca, the wife of a farmer outside Intercourse, and yes, that's a real town, been there 100 times. I was out there doing a consultation for a property adjacent to their farm, and I noticed she was wiping down her children's arms and legs with something before they went into the pasture. I asked her what it was. She looked at me like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Cedar oil, she said. Cedar and neem. Mixed with just enough water to spread it. Her mother used it. Her mother's mother used it. They rubbed it on the dogs. They wiped it on the fence posts near the wood line. The smell kept the ticks off, she told me. They didn't even think of it as pest control. It was just what you did before you went outside. I went home and started digging. What I found was that the active compound in cedarwood oil, cedrol and cedrine, if you want the technical names, disrupts the nervous system of arthropods. Ticks are arachnids, same family as spiders. Their nervous systems are sensitive to certain volatile organic compounds in a way that mammalian nervous systems, yours and mine, are not. Cedarwood oil doesn't kill a tick the way a chemical pesticide does. It does something more interesting. It interferes with the tick's ability to regulate moisture. Ticks breathe through their exoskeleton and they die quickly when they can't maintain their moisture balance. Cedar accelerates that process. It also acts as a powerful repellent before the tick ever lands. A paper I read back in the early 90s from research done somewhere out of the University Extension System in the Mid-Atlantic found that certain essential oil compounds showed repellent activity against ixodes species comparable to low concentrations of DEET. Not better than DEET at maximum concentration, but comparable to the concentration you'd actually find in a typical consumer repellent spray. And without a single one of the known irritants or potential endocrine concerns that come with synthetic chemistry. That's the thing about DEET. People think it's the gold standard. And in very specific high concentration applications, deep woods, active tick season, adults who are going to be out for hours, DEET has its place. I'm not going to tell you different, but the version most people are buying at the pharmacy, the off or repel sprays with 10 to 20% DEET, is not what the science is based on. The field studies that established DEET's effectiveness were done at 30 to 40% concentrations. What you're paying $15 for at the checkout line is a watered-down version of a 60-year-old compound, and it's still the first thing the industry points you to because it's branded and it's patented and somebody is making money off every bottle. Cedar oil has no patent. Neem oil has no patent. That's a big part of why you don't hear about them. Here's how the Amish mix it and how I've seen it used effectively for the better part of 20 years since that conversation in Lancaster County. You need two things. Cedarwood essential oil, not cedar extract, not cedar scented anything. Actual steam distilled cedarwood essential oil from the Virginia cedar or Atlas cedar. You can find it online for $2 to $4 an ounce if you're buying the right grade. And neem oil, cold pressed, unrefined. It smells like peanuts and sulfur and earth. That's the good stuff. The refined neem that smells clean has had the active compounds processed out. The ratio Rebecca used and the ratio I've tested myself is about 15 to 20 drops of cedarwood oil and 10 drops of neem oil to 4 ounces of water in a spray bottle. You add a small amount of liquid soap, just a few drops, to help the oils suspend in the water because oil and water don't mix on their own. You shake it before every use. Spray it on exposed skin, on pant legs, on the dog's coat before you walk out. Let it dry for 60 seconds. The smell fades to almost nothing on your skin within about 15 minutes, but it remains bioactive. The tick's chemoreceptors, the sensory organs it uses to detect a host, are disrupted by the residue even when you can't detect it anymore. That's the part that matters. You don't have to smell like a cedar chest all afternoon for this to work. Now, the neem component is important for the dogs, and I want to stay on this for a moment because if you've got a dog, you walk in any kind of green space, you need to hear this. Frontline, NexGard, Bravecto, these are the products your vet is selling you. Some of them run $50 to $80 a month. The active chemicals in those products are isoxazoline compounds or fipronil. They work systemically, meaning they go into the dog's bloodstream and kill the tick after it bites. After it bites, the tick still gets on the dog. The tick still has to draw blood before the compound reaches it. And with Lyme transmission, even assuming the longer end of that transmission window, that's a window you don't want to open, neem oil applied topically to a dog's coat is a repellent. The tick doesn't get on in the first place. It's safe for dogs when used properly and diluted. It is not safe for cats. I want to be very clear about that. Cats process certain compounds differently, and neem should not be applied to cats without explicit veterinary guidance. But for dogs, a diluted neem spray on the coat before a walk, focused on the belly, the groin, around the ears and neck, those are the spots. Tick's target is something I've been recommending since before most of those pharmaceutical products existed. And I know somebody watching this right now has a dog that's been on one of those monthly treatments and the dog still came home with ticks. You know exactly what I'm talking about because that's not an edge case. That's a known limitation of how those products work, and the insert in the package tells you so if you read it carefully enough. If you've dealt with that, if you've pulled a tick off your dog an hour after giving them a $100 treatment, I want you to tell me about it in the comments because you're not alone, and the more people who understand why that happens, the better. There's a third component to what the Amish do that I haven't mentioned yet, and it might be the most important one for protecting your yard. It's diatomaceous earth, food grade, the same stuff that's been used in grain storage since before the Second World War. It's not a chemical. It's a powder made from the fossilized shells of microscopic algae called diatoms. Under a microscope, it looks like broken glass, jagged, razor-edge particles that are completely harmless to mammals but catastrophic to insects and arachnids with exoskeletons. When a tick walks through diatomaceous earth, those microscopic edges damage the waxy outer layer of the tick's body. The same moisture regulation I mentioned earlier breaks down. The tick desiccates and dies. The Amish spread it around the base of fence posts, along the perimeter of gardens, at the edge of where mowed grass meets taller vegetation. That edge where your lawn ends and the brush begins is where 90% of the ticks on your property are going to be. It's called the ecotone, and it's where Ixodes scapularis hunts. A line of diatomaceous earth along that edge, reapplied after rain, creates a barrier that costs you less than $5 for an entire season of coverage on a typical quarter-acre lot. A bag of food-grade diatomaceous earth runs about $12 for a 4-pound bag at a farm supply store. That 4-pound bag will treat a large yard multiple times over the course of a summer. You want to apply it when it's dry, ideally in the morning before the dew burns off so it sticks. Use a dust applicator or just a squeeze bottle with holes poked in the lid. Focus on the wood line edge, any stone walls. Stone walls are tick habitat, and if you live in Connecticut or Pennsylvania or upstate New York, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Those old field stones attract mice and deer and every tick that comes with them, and along garden borders where you or your grandkids are going to be on their hands and knees. Does this combination replace every pest control measure known to man? No. In a high-pressure tick year, in a property that backs up to mature hardwood forest with heavy deer traffic, you might need additional strategies. But the cedar and neem oil daily application plus the diatomaceous earth perimeter barrier combined with a serious tick check protocol every time you come inside, that is a system, that is a layered defense. And it costs you $2 in oil, $12 in powder, and 5 minutes of attention per day. The pest control industry will charge you $400 to come spray your yard with synthetic pyrethroids once a season and send you a mailer every spring to remind you to schedule it again. The pharmaceutical industry will charge you $60 a month per dog for a product that still lets the tick get on your animal. And meanwhile, 40 miles from where I grew up, there's a community that's been solving this problem since before the United States was a country. They just never needed anyone to tell them it was a product worth selling. I spent 38 years walking the woods of Pennsylvania, and I'll tell you something they don't put on the bottle. The best protection against ticks was never about one product. It was always about understanding how the tick hunts and removing every advantage it has before it gets to you. Cedar oil removes the chemical advantage. Neem removes the grip on the dog's coat. Diatomaceous earth removes the territory at the wood line. You hit them at every stage. That's how you protect a family. The Amish didn't have a slogan for it. They didn't have a product to sell. They just passed it from grandmother to granddaughter for 200 years, and it worked every time. That knowledge almost got lost. I'm not going to let it stay buried. If this helped you, the subscribe button is right there, and I'm putting out a new video every single day. I've got 40 years of information that never made it into any pamphlet or any pharmacy shelf, and I'm not even close to done.